Okay, Sophia, thank you so much for being here. It
Thank you
really
for
means
having
so
me.
much. Of course, I've been really looking forward to it. I've been meaning to ask you to do this for a while, so it means a lot to have you here. Would you mind just starting this off and introducing yourself and just telling us where you're from?
Sure. I'm Sophia. Um, I am, I don't know. I'm from New York City. I'm from Queens. Born and raised, whole life. And yeah, I am a senior at Northwestern, studying film, minoring in Spanish. Yeah, is there anything else that I
No,
should
that's
include?
perfect.
Okay, cool.
So I mentioned this to you, but a big reason why I wanted to have you here, we took the one film class that I ever took here together. And I remember really, really liking everything that you made. I could tell that you were really, really talented. But
Thank you.
what really stood out to me and that I was really struck by and something that I was kind of jealous of was the fact that you had really lined up, it seemed to me, like you had lined up like a passion and a true interest with school.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people aren't able to do that, but I could tell with everything that you were making that you cared about what you were putting out and you appreciated kind of the progress you were making. So I'd just love to start this off by asking you, like, how did that interest in film kind of get started? When did you kind of see that as something you wanted to pursue?
Sure. God, I've been asked this question so many times by so many different people who are curious as to why I chose this, and the answer kind of changes every time. But the through line that I've found in my answers to the question um, is that I find that film is an amalgamation of everything. So you have visuals and visual aesthetics, you have sound and music aesthetics, you have storytelling. And it's like everything that you could possibly want all rolled into one. And on top of that, like it's escapism, it's entertaining, but it's also educational, and it's also expression. So it kind of felt like the perfect medium, you know?
Yeah.
Um, I, when I was 12, when I was in like sixth grade, um, I was on my first film set ever. Actually, I lied. The first film set I was ever on was The Deathly Hallows Part 2. I
No
was there when they
way.
filmed that. Yeah, it was radical. It was awesome. I got to like hold the owls and like pet the dogs and all that. It was really cool. But the first film set that I was ever like involved in, I was 12 and I got to act in an NYU grad student film, which was just about like, I think it was like some Catholic school girls accidentally summon Bloody Mary was the plot of that.
Very nice.
And I was fascinated by it. It was like, I was very young and everyone else was very young because it was like a group of sixth graders that were acting and everyone was like very jittery and annoyed that they had to sit around. But I was so into it. I was like, what is that? What is that? Why are you using that meter? Like I was so into it. Yeah. And I think it kind of like stemmed from there.
When were you, because I want to like talk about this idea of like lining up your interest in academics.
Yeah.
So when were you doing a lot of film while you were in school? Like when did that start?
So I started actually very soon after that. I started going to New York Film Academy, and I did that from eighth grade all the way through like senior year of high school.
Can you tell me like what that was like in terms of like
Yeah.
your workload?
Yeah. So I would go to like, regular high school during the year. And then in the summers, I would go study film. Um, and I did that for, yeah, I think like 4 years. And it was thrilling.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah. I made so many friends during that who like also were very passionate about it, which was interesting because I went to a very small high school in New York. And I was like the only person who was very interested in film.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of people who come up in film like have friends who also do it with them. I didn't have that. So I found that at New York Film Academy. And that was also interesting because that summer program for teens like attracts people from all over the world. So I have friends in Brazil, I have friends from Shanghai, I have friends from Mexico City who like all came to do this. One of my friends actually is shooting my senior directing film.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my
yeah. And I
God.
met him through New York Film Academy. So that's
That's
exciting.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the workload, like was something that I was really like, I wanted to take it on because there was nothing that could give me the outlet that I wanted in high school. And I did so much work in high school. Like, I mean, every Northwestern student kind of like does it all sort of thing. And I did that, but none of it was as fulfilling as I wanted it to be.
Well, this is a question I wanted to ask you. Like, it's obvious that you care about your work in this kind of arena of film. But what I was really excited to ask you about was like, did you like care? Like, it sounds like you like worked hard in high school, whatever, at regular school. But did you have even close to the same level of motivation to do your other work?
So I cared, and I cared a lot, but I was pissed off about it because, like, you know, that was just like the environment that I was raised in was like you have to do well.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You know, apply yourself, be disciplined about it. And I did. I fully did. But again, like, it wasn't anything that was particularly fulfilling. I like would have, not to get like emotional about it, but like sometimes I would have breakdowns about it because I was doing all of this work and all this shit in high school, and all of these like extracurriculars and like sports and schoolwork and all that. And I like didn't find any pleasure in any of it. And I was always like, I just want to do what I want to do. Like, when can I get through this? When can I get to that point? And then I found out that I could go to school for film, and like the discipline that I had applied to myself while I was doing all these other things in high school, I found that it could be applied in such a way that I would find fulfilling. So then I applied to film school.
I understand.
Yeah.
So now that you're kind of approaching the end of it, you know, end of your 4 years here, I'd love to know, like, if your perspective on pursuing film in college has changed, or your perspective on like how you spent your time even in high school. So looking back on it, do you think that you would like go to college again, and would you maybe like make the decision earlier to completely focus on film, or do you think that the opportunities like coming to a place like this are worth it?
Interesting. I think that yes, I would go to college again, but I wouldn't go to Northwestern for film, because Northwestern, as much as I appreciate like the general education that I can get here, is not, how do I put this? The environment of film is, first of all, very underfunded. Second of all, everyone who participates in it, because film is a very interpersonal environment, there are not as many people as I would have gotten like somewhere like NYU, for example, who are as passionate and as driven about the actual production side of things.
Yeah.
Because I'm into like production. I would want to be on set. I'm addicted to being on set.
Awesome.
But most people here are like kind of into the, you know, administrative side of it, I guess. Like, I know a lot of people who want to be like agents, and a lot of people who want to be producers.
Really,
and,
like RTVF majors?
Yeah.
That have made that decision for that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of that stems from like that's what their families do. But it's also, I think people come to Northwestern and come to the film program and then kind of hate the classes that they have here, so they're turned off of it. And they know that they still want to like work in the film field, but they're no longer as driven as they were before, because some of the spirit kind of kills.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was able to kind of maintain my momentum on this because I was so addicted to it. But yeah, I would say that I would definitely go to college again. And I think that I started doing film early enough. Like, I started in
it sounds
7th,
like
8th
it.
grade.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, I'm so thankful for that experience. And then I didn't just start like coming into college, because I know a lot of people who didn't have any experience, came into college, didn't know what they were getting themselves into. And I watched them kind of struggle through it. But like with the experience that I had, I was able to get into college, and like within the first few weeks, I was already first ADing someone's film. And it was like, cool. Oh, okay, I can totally do this. And that gave me like a level of confidence that I didn't think I would have otherwise.
Yeah. I've spoken to a lot of people about their experiences here, obviously, like going to this school. And something that's really interesting to me about like the creative side of coming here is the opportunity that you get to like work on projects with other students. It seems to me like it's one of the best opportunities, that's available to you. I'd love to know about like some of the stuff that you've worked on with other students here. Anything that like really sticks out to you?
Yeah, I managed to kind of, I mean, there are like everything in life, there are kind of cliques in the film world.
Yeah.
Like some people kind of find their group of people and then they continue to make movies with those people. And I have that group of people, which is really important because then I can move out of college with that group of people. And in the next few years, if any of us wants to make a movie, we can just be like, hey,
Yeah.
you 10 guys,
Yeah.
let's go do this. And people will hop in a van and do it. But it has been really amazing, like the, kind of cohort that I have amassed here. Some of my best friends are also film majors, and it's such an honor to be able to make something
That must be so exciting.
artistic and fulfilling with your best friends. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, it makes me think again about this idea of lining your passions up with academics, because I've said it before on here. It's really important what you study, not just because it's the degree you're going to get and what you're going to learn, but it dictates like who you're spending your time with. And for you to have found like community with people that like have your same interests and aspirations, that's really cool, honestly. And that is a really, really awesome thing to have. Something that you mentioned that was really interesting to me, kind of talking about like the different aspirations of kids in RTVF, whether they like want to be an agent or they want to be a producer. I'd love to know in your head, and even going back to before you got here, what you saw for yourself in the future and kind of maybe like what your dream career is. I think it's great to ask people, because I think that a lot of the times it comes true, It's these big grand ideas in the back of your head that you are working towards that you maybe don't like to verbalize that frequently, that will be what you do. So I would love to know like what your dream is.
I have to direct, like flat out. I have to. And that like freaks a lot of people out when I say it that way, but that's how it is. Yeah, it's like I know a lot of people who are more interested in the writing side of things, and I know a lot of people who are more interested in the acting side of things. And everyone's kind of unsure about that, but I have had enough experience at this point. I've been on over 100 film sets, something like that, that I like am convicted that is what I want to do.
It seems to me like, I'm just imagining like it really does seem like it's clear that you are like dedicated to this and you've thrown yourself into it. So I can understand how your parents would still be like critical or have their reservations or whatever, but has their mindset about what you're doing like developed over time as you've kind of proven yourself more and more?
Yeah, I mean, they like, I think they're very, or rather, I should phrase it a different way. They don't quite understand what I mean when I say I want to do film. Their idea of it is like you get hired as a PA at HBO, and then you work your way up, and eventually you pitch your script to like X and X studio, and then that's how that happens. So it's very office based, I guess, which I can't fucking stand.
Yeah. I'm sure you don't look at the industry like that.
No, not at all. Like my I took a class this past year, which is called Directors on Directing, and this woman who taught it, I love her. Her name is Chris Ray. She's a director. She just brought in a bunch of people who had been successful directing. One of them happened to be Barry Jenkins, who is awesome. And I spoke to him and he was like, "You're going to start an art collective." And I was like, "Yes, Barry Jenkins.
Yeah.
Yes, I am." But I was surprised by the way that they had lived their lives. And I decided that was what I want to do. And what they did was they just held like odd jobs for a few years, and like built up a certain amount of money, made a film, entered it in some sort of festival. The festival picked up the film, and then they worked from there. And so that's kind of how I want to do it, I think. Like I want to...
It sounds very... I gotta say, like, especially with your dad's background, it
Yeah.
sounds like something that maybe he should be excited by. And I would understand
Yeah.
if, you know, he has his impression of what the film industry is, but you know, from my perspective, I'm trying to do this just like off the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I see this like amazing time of life and you know, this just space that the world is in at the moment where you can kind of make something for yourself and just put it out there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And I do want to know if you've had that conversation with him or both of your parents, like, you know, trying to explain more like what your plans are and what you think you can do.
I have. I think there's a level of like not having seen that on their part. So like I mean I took this class and I spoke to all these people, so I understand
Yeah.
that. They didn't take the class.
Yeah.
They didn't, you know, they haven't seen what this means. And so I think part of it is just like a misunderstanding in terms of what I'm actually talking about.
Yeah.
But I think there's also like some level of, on the part of both my parents, but like largely my dad, because he's this type of person, there's a level of anxiety about like, you know, your child is growing up and saying they want to be bohemian. Like, what are you talking about, child? Like, get a job.
Yeah.
Which, you know, is kind of inherent to every parent. But I think that ultimately, like, you know, they're very hardworking people, but they're also very kind people somewhere deep down. And I think that they do have faith in what I am trying to do because they have seen me in all of my other endeavors, and they know that I, like, not to like hype myself up here, have the potential to be successful in what I'm doing. So while there is that anxiety and while there is that like kind of level of misunderstanding, I think that ultimately they have confidence in me.
That's great. And I'm happy to hear that, just because I think what stood out to me about what you said is this idea of like your parents didn't take that class. I think about this a lot. When you get advice from your parents and they're trying to give, you know, I have a tremendous amount of respect for my parents. I think that they're both like very bright people, and their guidance and their advice has helped me so much in my life. But at the end of the day, what I keep coming around to is, especially in terms of comedy, they haven't really been exposed to like my sense of humor like that. But I just think there's something about like you haven't lived in my experience, and I'm using my experiences to determine what I think I'm good at and what I can and want to pursue.
Right.
And yeah, you can give me advice on like what's practical or whatever, but I'm making that decision based off of like the information that's been fed to my brain constantly for my whole life. You know, it's not like I'm just making this decision after like 20 years of life experience or whatever. You know, it's just not really like that.
Yeah.
Another thing that I wanted to ask you about, in this vein of, you know, going to college, growing up, having new life experiences, and figuring yourself out. I'm sure that this past year you were living off campus. Am I right? Mm-hmm. What was the experience of like moving out and like beyond being in a dorm, like having an apartment to yourself and kind of, you know, starting to see what like real life is like?
Yeah.
And you know, that's like in terms of like what it's been like for you to live in your own apartment, like cooking for yourself and kind of like, you know, creating your own space. I'm sure that's something that you enjoy.
Yes,
so I'd love to know like what that's
so.
been like for you.
Yeah. It's kind of awesome because, right, like you move out of the dorm, or at least this is what I did. I moved out of the dorm. I moved into my childhood bedroom for that quarantine summer.
Yep.
And it was like a shocking experience. I was like, who the fuck am I? Like, what am I doing here? And then leaving my childhood bedroom and moving into my first apartment was so refreshing. It was so like, oh, okay, thank God, I'm back where I'm supposed to be. Like I'm back on track in terms of growing up. And yeah, I mean, it's been really great. I live with my two best friends. It's been a little psychotic because in terms of like quarantining, we've kind of created this like bubble of insanities. We've like, you know, all of the words that we say and the way that we speak and the humor that we have is so locked within this bubble of ourselves. So coming out of that now is interesting. But it's also like, I don't know. It was really refreshing. It was really kind of in a strange way. I'm glad that it happened the way that it happened, because now I have come out of it with a lot more confidence in like going into the world. And I gotta say, I love my apartment. Like we have a great space that we found, and like the windows are big, and I love to have big windows. Yeah. So it's been like kind of amazing.
I'm really glad you brought
Yeah.
up the point about like going home to your childhood bedroom in quarantine,
Yeah.
because I like, oh my God, that just takes me back to, because it was really weird.
It
Like,
was weird.
I did the same thing as well.
Yeah.
Like, I went from that for so many months to being like literally like what am I doing? Like, how am I making any progress? I did that like quarter of pass fail online school. Was just like, what am I doing? And then getting to the apartment was great. I want to know like what you think about living around here though as well. Like, what do you feel about Chicago? And when you're thinking about like the rest of your life, I know you're from New York. I'm from New Jersey, so you know I feel that same call. But what do you think about like where you want to spend your time for the rest of your life?
Great question. Most people don't like my answer to this question because I can get a little snarky about it, but I kind of hate Evanston and I kind of hate Chicago.
Really?
Yeah.
You're not the first person to say that though.
Okay. I kind of figured. It's just that like, I don't know, growing up in New York, like New York is better Chicago. You know what I mean? Like there's
Except it smells like pee, but yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, it smells like hot piss year round, but you know, Chicago, there's something about Midwestern sensibility that I can't quite mesh with. And like I appreciate it. I'm glad that I did spend my time here, and I'm glad that I like have gotten that experience and have that understanding of this part of the country, because I, you know, lived somewhere that I will say this without reservation, Queens, New York is statistically speaking the most diverse place in the entire world. And I was so glad to kind of come up there, because I have, at least I think I have, such a good understanding of everybody. And Chicago and Evanston specifically has not given me that in the same way. And I realized that I crave it because I've been missing it.
It's really important who you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
I'm sure you agree with that, whether it's the people you live with or, you know, who you're hanging out with and eating lunch with. But for me, it always seemed like New York was just a great way to motivate yourself. You know, I think that there is a difference between the culture here and the culture there, where I feel like if I'm just standing in the street in New York, I'm like, fuck, what am I doing? You know, because everybody has that mentality. You wouldn't be there if you didn't, you know, you wouldn't go and like live in a shithole, especially like for a lot of young people, like going and like living in a really confined space to like work on something. They wouldn't do it if they weren't like actually doing it. So I think there's something to that for sure. I'd love to know, kind of circling back to like academics and stuff. When you've taken like film classes here, has there been anything that's really stuck out to you that you like learned a particularly lot from? Anything that like surprised, any classes you took that surprised you, were like, wow, I'm really glad I took that?
Interestingly, I think the classes that I learned the most from were classes that were not explicitly film classes, but could involve like a filmic element. So the first thing that comes to mind is I took this class, performance of poetry. And I took it remotely because it happened this past year. And that like allowed me to, because we couldn't perform poetry in front of one another, we couldn't do it together. You could then like explore making videos about poetry, which I thought was so cool. I loved it. And the woman who taught it, her name is Mary Zimmerman. She's a fantastic playwright. She's like knows her shit about poetry. She was such a good professor. And she was so open to like people doing film projects. And yeah, I think that there was something in my brain that hadn't been able to exercise this in the same way, but there's, poetry is so specific, which is why I really enjoy it. It's like so, the details of it are minute, and like it was such a great exercise to be able to extrapolate those details and decide how I wanted to portray them visually or within an audio sphere. And I loved it.
Yeah, it sounds like a blessing for you that it was online. You get to really like play to your strengths and interests.
Yeah, and it was like a way of being creative that I hadn't really ever explored before, and like it was so refreshing and it was so interesting.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Honestly, it's one of my favorite things about doing this is having people from all different backgrounds and majors and asking them that question. I feel like there's so many classes that I found that I'm excited to take just because I don't know. It's you get lost in like the just piles and piles of classes that you can take, but like, hearing that kind of perspective, or like, one that I'm excited to take next year is like storytelling in the theater department. Classes like that like I would have never been exposed to, that I'm just like happy to know about, honestly. That sounds awesome though. Kind of on the same topic, in terms of like all the projects that I told you, I was scrolling through your Vimeo. I watched a lot of the stuff that you've done. Are there projects that you've made that are kind of like favorites of yours so far, or no?
Yeah, I have some favorites. I will say the reason that I have favorites is because I tend to be very critical of myself, especially in terms of film. So like I need things to turn out good, and if they don't turn out exactly the way I want them to, then it like kind of sucks. But the favorites that I have so far are one project that I did for this post-cinema class that I took last year.
I think I watched this.
Which was really cool. And I shot it at home because I was at home at the time. And
Is it called The Love Witch? Am I making that up?
No, that was for a class that I took this year.
Was it also called Post-Cinema though, or no?
It was called Flush is what it was called.
Okay.
Yeah. It was about, I shot it on my phone. It was a one-woman production because none of my family knows how to do film, and I had them act in it. And they were all kind of pissed off at how long everything took, and I was like, please, I just have to set up this lighting. Please just bear with me. But I loved it because the project was to shoot something like a Transformers film and to edit it like a Transformers film. And I thought, what the fuck
That's awesome. That's awesome.
It's awesome, right? And the way that those films are edited is so interesting in such a way that I didn't pay attention to before, and I won't like get into like post-cinema theory, but applying that to my own sense of aesthetics was really cool. And so I shot this film that was entirely on an iPhone with like little iPhone lenses, and it was like edited kind of in the style of like an action film, and it was about a poker game, and I got to stylize it. I got to like set music to it. It was really, really fun. And the fact that I like did the entire thing myself was like, it felt like something of an accomplishment. And like the professor loved it. She loved it so much. And then I think my second favorite thing that I've done is last quarter I took a horror production class. And horror is what I want to do.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
100%. Yeah. And I got together with my friend to do this, who was also in the class, and we made the most batshit film.
I think I watched this one.
Was it the one about the dead lizard?
No. I'm thinking of, I think it's Brenda Deserves a Shallow Grave.
I made that for the same class. Okay. That was
I'm like, did I watch the wrong shit? Like, what?
Yeah,
you're not recognizing any of these titles.
I think you're just watching like the stuff that I posted like a few weeks back. So that's like the earliest stuff. But this was like a few months ago. And story behind this, my roommate had a chameleon for a few months, and the chameleon died. And we buried him in the front yard. And then like 4 weeks later, I had to make this film. We were like, what can we do possibly for a horror film? Let's dig up the chameleon. So we dug up this poor guy. He was like rotting. Like,
oh my God.
He was like entirely black. And we made this horror film that like just like again shot on an iPhone, very impromptu kind of thing. And the plot of the thing was that I was the main character and I gave birth to like a dead lizard baby. And I will say it again, it was batshit. It's ridiculous. But it's set to like a soundtrack from Wicked the musical, and it's insane and it makes no sense. But it's so fun. I don't know. It's like it's campy, but it's also like kind of art house in a way that I think horror films really respond well to. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to make.
That sounds awesome. I'm gonna watch it for sure.
Yeah.
Why horror? How did you decide on that? When did you start thinking like that?
Oh God. Horror origin story. Seriously, this is gonna sound so corny. I was born on Friday the 13th of October under a full moon. I
know, I understand. It makes sense.
Yeah,
it's meant
but
to be.
it was like one of those things where like my parents always thought it was like cool, and they would tell that to people about me, and people would be like, "Oh, so she's
gonna kill you guys."
Spooky. Yeah, and I'd be like, "Fuck yeah, I am spooky. Like, what can I do about it?" Yeah, that and like in a strange way, I did total tangent, but I did martial arts for like the first 10 years of my life.
Oh, really? What'd you do?
I did Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Oh, cool.
And I got my black belt when I was 8. So it was like...
I love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm Brazilian. I don't know if you know that.
I did not know
lived
that.
there for a few years, so I
Yeah.
did it there for a little bit. I love it. That's awesome that you did that.
Yeah. And it was just one of those things where like, as like an 8-year-old, I had a certain confidence that other 8-year-olds didn't quite have, because like after school I went and I grappled kids. And so that kind of confidence and that sense of like hard assery, I guess kind of like funneled its way into horror in a sense, because there's something about horror that doesn't scare me. I don't have any sort of like, I don't know. I keep using the word reservations, but I don't have any reservations about it because I grew up with that like level of confidence, I guess. And I also think that like, so that like allowed me to start watching horror film, because I was like, I'm not scared of this shit.
Yeah.
Like I like it.
I think some people are just able to make the mental switch of like, this is somebody made this.
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Yeah. And like, I think that the special effects that allows are so interesting. I think that it's a market that a lot of people are seriously underexposed to just because of like the nervousness about it.
Yeah. That's a great point. There's a lot of people that are just like, I don't watch that kind of movie.
Right, exactly. And I think that like having the confidence to go into that and try it out and then fall in love with it was really awesome. Yeah, and I think that it's kind of its own subculture, horror, and horror film specifically, because there's such a crazy history of it. And I love it. I'm fascinated by it.
I wanted to ask you about your influences in general. Maybe we can start with horror films, but movies, TV, music, like what are you into?
Oh boy. Genuinely, I have a very, very wide range of taste, I think. But let's see, what are some
Your Instagram's a
influences?
King Cruel title, right?
There is a King Cruel song that has the same title as my
Slash
Instagram. Yeah.
Is it a term that existed way before that?
It's a brand of like Slurpee.
Oh, really?
It's like, yeah, it's like a
Oh my
dessert.
God.
Yeah. Like a slush
So you
puppy is
didn't
just
name
like
it
a
after
Slurpee.
the song?
Okay. The origin of this name is that when I was a junior in high school, I was really, really into Flower Boy. And Tyler posted something on his Instagram. Like he just like posts these like photo concepts for when he releases an album, which like a lot of artists do.
I'm
It's very
a
common.
big fan of him, by the way, as well.
That's
I can tell. And when I met you, I think you were wearing his shoes.
I am wearing his necklace right now. But yeah, he just like had this photo up on Instagram that I really liked, and he captioned it "slush puppy," and I was like, shit, all right, that's cool. And so I just did that. And now,
Awesome.
interestingly enough,
I really love him.
Yeah, me too. He's amazing. He just does whatever the fuck he wants to do and has no holds barred, and it's really cool. But that has now become like a nickname for me, which I never really had growing up. Like I didn't really have any sort of nickname, but people call me Slush, which is really fun. Yeah.
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 I really wanted to, kind of going back into, you kind of mentioned it already, talking about the people that you found here and the group that you found here. And it's really inspiring to hear about it, honestly. But I'd love to know kind of more generally, when you got here, what are the communities that you like involved yourself in, and where have you like really found like close friends?
I got to Northwestern like kind of intent on doing like more dramatic things, like drama centered things. And I quickly realized that that was not what I wanted to do because I didn't really like mesh with the people who were doing those sorts of things. And that's how I ended up getting into comedy. I was not expecting to get into comedy, but now I'm heavily involved in it. Largely because, for one thing, it's one of the most accessible extracurricular film things that you can do at Northwestern. And for another thing, I just kind of dug the people. Like there was, I am on the exec board for Sherman Ave. I run the Sherman Ave Instagram.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I love the Sherman Ave. Yeah. That's awesome.
Um,
That's actually so cool.
Yeah. And I do, NSTV.
Yeah.
I
I was in it for like my freshman
Yeah.
year.
We were at retreat, I think, the first year. Yeah.
Holy
Yeah.
shit.
Yep. I remember. And yeah, so I think I'm going to be directing that this next year. So that's like
Oh, really?
a fun thing to do.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I was head writer this past
Are
year.
you going to co-direct it with somebody?
I'm going to co-direct with, probably, Renee, my friend Renee. She's got the curly dark hair.
It sounds really familiar.
I bet you would recognize her.
I'm sure.
But I think that she and I are probably going to direct it next year. But yeah, so the comedy scene has offered me like a bunch of people, because the other thing about comedy is that like a lot of film kids are involved in comedy. You can find people that have the same sort of like bastardly sense of humor as you, who will also like be down to make dumb films with you. Like perfect. It works perfectly. So yeah, I think I kind of fell into that scene.
Yeah.
And I wasn't expecting to, but it was like kind of a nice surprise. Yeah.
Do you have, thinking about people that kind of want to go into this industry, that you've made so much progress in kind of becoming somebody that will be able to like make it and create. Is there anything that you would tell somebody maybe in high school that like shares your interests, that kind of really wants to go down that path, or maybe is unsure if they can? Is there anything that you would like just like provide any advice, or anything that you would have told yourself when you were younger?
I think the first advice that I would give someone like that is that there is no need to be unsure. I think a lot of people kind of instill this anxiety in especially young people who are intent on pursuing some sort of like creative discipline. Because, it is difficult. Yeah, like technically speaking, it is a difficult life to live if you want to be very successful at it. But also, I was offered this advice by an acting teacher once in high school. There is always, always room for somebody else. And I took that to heart. And now I have this confidence going into this sphere that I wouldn't otherwise have. So I think ultimately the advice is, yeah, there's no need to be unsure about it. Like, do it, be driven about it. Even just like try it out, dip your toes in. If you hate it, you hate it. You can pull back. If you love it, you love it. Go for it. Like, there's really no need to feel anxiety about it at all. Just, follow your heart about it. Yeah, I don't know.
I think you put that really well, and it honestly reminds me of something that I've heard stand-ups talk about before. There's this idea I heard. I don't remember who it was. It was a comic that was asked about. Somebody was like just starting, and they wanted to know like, hey, like, should I give this up? Like, how do I know if I'm gonna make it? My friends aren't that supportive of me.
Yeah.
They don't like believe in me to do it or whatever. But it's something that I wanted to do. And the response that they gave was that, like, the only people that will make it are the people that are gonna do it either way.
Right.
So it's about, like, if you truly have the passion for it and you have the desire to regularly go up and work on yourself and like write jokes, and if you're gonna do that no matter what, that's what it takes.
Yeah.
And if you and I think that what you should be replacing anxiety about, like, are you good enough, it should be replaced with anxiety about, like, are you like committed enough?
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
because it's, you only have so much time. People obviously aren't on a level playing field in terms of creating anything, but if you use your time to work towards something, you're gonna get somewhere.
Right.
And whether that's comedy or film, I think that that's like the biggest thing to highlight is, like, commit to something. If you want to do it, act like that's who you are and do it. And if something happens, but
Yeah.
that's the only way that it's even possible, I feel like.
Yeah, I think that's why I phrase it in the way of, like, I have to be a director, because not only does that, like, kind of shock some people, but it also instills in my mind, like, oh yeah, you do. Like, that is what you are so driven to do, so you're going to go do it. And, like, having that, like, drive to go for it has been really helpful. And also, like, it kind of, like, allows me to inspire myself. Like, sometimes I'm taken aback by the drive that I have. I'm like, whoa, girl, that's cool. Like, you go for it. So yeah, it's,
I really like
level
that
of
you
confidence
point
in
that out,
yourself.
honestly,
Yeah.
because that's something that I see myself doing. Even like
Yeah.
doing this is like,
Yeah.
like anything that I say, especially on here, but just in general to, like, people. If you
Yeah.
verbalize something, and it makes it all more crushing if you, like, give something up. Like, people go to school and they're like, oh, I'm gonna be pre-med, and they tell all their friends and their family, I'm gonna be pre-med, I'm gonna be pre-med, I'm pre-med, I'm pre-med, and then if you ultimately make that decision that's not for you, it's kind of crushing,
Yeah.
not only because it's what you wanted for yourself at some point or thought you were going to do, but if you verbalized it to people, if people you respect know that you wanted to do that and then you don't do it, it kind of hurts,
Yeah.
and that sucks to some degree, but there's also, like, a superpower in that. Like,
Right.
if you really want something, you can take your motivation to the next level by just putting it out there and being like, I do this, so if I don't do it, it's embarrassing.
Yeah. I think there's also a level of, like, allow yourself to change. So, like, if you are somebody who's pre-med and you're, like, you've told everybody that you're pre-med and then you decide that you don't want to be, like, that's fine. Just have confidence in whatever it is that you want to do. If you were like, that isn't for me, I'm going to go find what's for me, that's fucking awesome. Like, good for you for changing your mind in the first place. That's a scary thing to do. And, now that you've gone through that, you can go find something that suits you, and that's fine. Just kind of, always have confidence in your own ability to, decide what you want in life and to pursue things.
I'm glad you said that as
Yeah.
well, because I think that's
Yeah.
definitely important. We're approaching an hour.
Cool.
I've got just a couple of more questions I
Sure.
wanted to ask you. I'd love to know a little bit more about your family.
Yeah.
Do you have siblings?
I do. I have one younger brother.
Oh, yeah?
Just graduated high school.
How is he doing? Does he have aspirations anywhere similar to you?
It's interesting. He was a little bit, he grew up, like, kind of under my shadow, unfortunately, because we went to the same high school and the high school is very small. And he was a little bit, like, intimidated by how early I decided what I wanted to do, because I had made that decision by age, like, 12, 13, which most people don't do.
Yeah.
But he and I were also, before I went to college, we've, like, drifted apart a little bit. We were very close. He's 3 years younger than I am. And, like, so seeing me do that was intimidating for him. And he hadn't quite decided what he'd want to do yet. And he felt very, like, he felt pressure to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't think so far he hasn't like quite latched on to something yet. But he did kind of start getting interested in like photography. Cause I, introduced him to like using cameras and sort of things like that. So he was very interested in photography for a while. He was interested in, I also introduced him to like fashion and the fashion industry. So he was interested in fashion photography for a while,
cool.
which I think is really cool.
Yeah,
and I think
that is.
like if he likes that, then he should pursue it. But I also like take great care with him to tell him kind of what I was saying before, which is that it's okay if you don't know what you want yet. Just have the confidence in yourself that you will be able to find that. So he's going to BU in the fall, Boston University, and I think he's going to pursue some sort of like communications-esque degree. And I think that is a smart choice for him. And I think that will open up a lot of different avenues for him to choose what it is that he wants.
You sort of mentioned that your parents aren't directly in creative fields, although I think you could definitely argue that entrepreneurship is extremely creative.
Certain creativity,
yeah. But it's not like this an established like film industry or painting or whatever. But I can only imagine that your parents are creative. So I would love to know like if there's any like, are there any projects in their lives that are particularly creative? Is there anything that they like to work on where you're like, oh, maybe that's where I got this like desire and this eye?
Both of my parents grew up playing music. My mom played piano and then she played French horn in an orchestra, and my dad grew up playing jazz trumpet. And he was in a family band.
This makes sense.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. He would play gigs with his dad, who played the alto saxophone. I think maybe it was a tenor. I don't remember. But I did grow up around a lot of like important music. By important, I mean like classical and jazz. And so like I played classical piano for a long time, and then I get into like guitar and all of that sort of stuff, and I was in a few bands in high school, and that was like music was a very, very big thing in my household.
That's awesome. You were in bands.
Yeah.
That's sick.
Yeah. That, and then my mom is really, really into costume design. So like every Halloween, she would make these very elaborate costumes for me and my brother, and it was just like this family tradition, and she gets so into it and she's so enthused by it. Some of my favorites were, one year I was I forgot her name, Olivia Wilde's character from Tron Legacy, but have you seen this movie?
Yeah,
It's got the like whole light up she made me this light up
serious.
And not to mention, they have these discs on their back, and she made me one of those, and I could take it off and throw it like a frisbee, and it had the lights on it and everything.
That's amazing.
So cool.
That's so
it was
cool.
So cool. So she's like very, very passionate about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that was another thing like with film where I was like, oh shit, like I can apply my knowledge of that and even her knowledge of that to this thing that I want to do. And I thought that was really cool. Yeah.
That's really, really interesting. Yeah. We used to do the homemade costumes as well. Not to that level. I was like I remember I was like a foosball player.
Hell yeah.
So it was like I had the broomstick in my shoulder and I had like a little like screw, like a big screw and like a soccer jersey.
Yeah.
It was sweet. It was no like Tron Legacy story, but that's really cool to hear about.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, did you grow up with pets?
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
What kinds of pets?
Throughout my life, I have had 3 dogs. They were all the same kind of dog.
Did you grow up in an apartment?
No. I grew up in a house.
Okay.
Yeah. I live in Forest Hills, which is like in New York, but like there are houses there. Yeah. But yeah, I've always had dogs. I don't know what to even really say about them other than.
Do you want to have pets in the future?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think like it's a weird question, but it's like one of the few that's like consistent on basically every episode as I ask about that. I do think like, I mentioned to you, like the point of this is like trying to give an opportunity to like connect to people and like, real conversation, whatever in this, especially like throughout COVID. It was just like something that I really wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that like people's like relationships with animals is like a really interesting way to do that. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's like just me, but like I'm always like fascinated to see like how people like interact with their pets or like how long they've had them. Like it's very telling sometimes, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know. It's. I love having pets. I love kind of having like some guy who lives in my house. Like I don't know how else to put it other than like
Oh, you put it great.
yeah, it's it's something of a like I give him food and water and he gives me unconditional love. Like that's it's kind of easy money,
Yeah.
Very simple thing to do. But yeah, I've always kind of been into animals and I'm not, I've only ever had dogs, but I would like to have, I don't know, cats. I guess I technically co-parented a chameleon for a few months, but it did die.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, rest in peace, Gizmo.
Watch the movie so his death wasn't in vain.
Yeah, my other roommate actually made her senior directing film this year, and he is in the film.
The dead body?
No, living. He's alive during it, so it was kind of an homage to his life.
Holy shit. What a
yeah.
famous chameleon. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm really, really glad that you came and did this with me. It really means a lot to me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I've been really looking forward to it. I can't say how much I'm grateful for you to do it. So thank you again. I look forward to like seeing everything that you continue to make, and hopefully in like a decade we can do it again and we can catch up and see where we're at.
That'll be cool.
Awesome. Thank you.